Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, on the latest edition of Across the Cavs. It is that time of the year. That's right. Didn't have Donovan Mitchell a year ago at this time. Now the Cavs do. The team they did business with, they've done a lot of business with. That is the Utah Jazz. So while not every Cavs fan will admit it, we are all very invested in what happens over there with how many former Cavs, obviously Lauri Markkanen now at All-NBA and All-Star, and somehow the last pick in the All-Star draft. That was a bad decision. But we got Richie Ostler and we got Jackson Stevenett. They both host Jazz podcasts. They both know that team a lot better than I can claim to know them. So when we come back, we're getting into the Jazz offseason and talking Emoni Bates. And obviously the biggest reason we're really all here, a certain Donovan Spider Mitchell. All right, Richie, Jackson, great to have you both on. Jackson, you've been here before. Richie, we've interacted a ton. We were all in the same pod network. That's how we all got together. So, Richie, since the days of the Hoops Pod Network, unfortunately folded. Still got some great connections. What's been up in your pod basketball fandom life?
Great question. Well, we used to be over at the Thatcher Effect on all streaming places. However, we have changed. We're currently Swish Lake City. We've done a little bit of rebranding, focusing more on just Jazz content. Before we were focusing on Utah football, Utah Utes basketball, but now we are just in the Jazz world, and it's a good place to be.
And Jackson, how about yourself? How's the Jazz Beats life now under new guys?
You know what? It's the off season. I'm sure you know how that goes a little bit. So we've kind of been on a little bit of drag. We're hopefully, now that the draft's over with, going to pick things up a little bit and get back into this new team we got. It's a different feel so far with this new Jazz team ever since the big trade you alluded to earlier. So things are looking good. We're hoping to get a little busier now that the season's at least at the end of the tunnel. So I'm ready to get going again.
Yeah, and Richie, what are some of your thoughts? It's been a year now. Obviously, September 1st will mark the official 1 year. A season went by, another draft went by. I think the Jazz are looking pretty good after this Donovan Mitchell trade, all things considered.
Oh, I think we're feeling great. I wonder how Cavs fans are feeling. That's kind of where I'm thinking. How are Cavs fans doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, they lost to the Knicks in 5. You know, I haven't held back how I felt about it. A lot could have gone better. But Donovan Mitchell's not the reason for that series going awry. And if you think about having Sexton and Markkanen, maybe they don't win as many games. Maybe they end up with a different matchup. And the East ended up being a nightmare with Miami taking out both 1 and 2. So anything really could have happened. I guess I'm glad the Cavs didn't have to play the Heat. It would have been even more embarrassing. But I give the Knicks credit. You know, I think the trade is worth it. I think we're going to learn more this season. He's great. He was as advertised, a 70-point game, top 3 things I've ever seen from start to finish. Obviously, wish I could have been there for it, but he's a baller. I knew he was a baller, but when he gets on your favorite team, Jackson, right, it changes things. You've had Gordon Hayward, who before Don, people forget how good he was, and having a superstar just makes watching your team so much different.
Can I throw a wrinkle in there before? Maybe we're talking about this later, but Jazz Twitter seems to have come up with some Donovan Mitchell drama. I think that's what we do when we lose a guy that was near and dear with him and I think the Brooklyn Nets owner or coach, and then Mikal Bridges hanging out together, and there's talks of now him looking towards Brooklyn in free agency. I don't know how legitimate those are, but what are your thoughts on that? Because we've all been there. Us Jazz fans have seen that a little bit, and him. He's a very social guy, so I think he just has friends across the league. So where you at?
Well, first I'll say that he was golfing with Mr. Brunson, Rick Brunson, Nick's assistant, Jalen's father. That's fine. Don's got a lot of friends in the league, and we learned in the bubble who the other friendships really were. Some of them based on geography, so all the European players getting together, Jokic and Vucevic and Marjanovic and everybody in the bubble we saw. I don't put much into it. He's a friendly guy. You know, I think Josh Hart and Don are friends. He likes these Villanova guys. I stake no claim in that. It means absolutely nothing. The Nets are turning down Mikal trades apparently every 30 seconds. So I don't really know what's going to happen with them. Are they going to pay Cam? Are they going to let Houston overpay Cam and just he walks? They're going to do a sign-and trade. I think the question isn't does he join Mikal? It's do the Nets decide Mikal is the piece with all the assets they now have and extra picks they could even flip with a player to get something bigger. Do they think he's still the guy? So I think we'll see. I don't worry about – I'm not thinking beyond this season yet. Everyone's focused on Jared Allen and his drama, but because he had one bad playoff series. We've all seen guys struggle in the playoffs. Doesn't mean trade them. Twitter fans aren't always real fans. They're stirring the pot. Thankfully, none of us are like that. We don't stir the pot like that.
Of course not.
No, but the Cavs drafted one player, and we'll talk Jazz after. But I know, Richie, I know you're more of a college basketball guy as well, and you're following everything going on. So what do you think about Emoni Bates for the Cavs? It seems like a low risk, high reward. You take him at 49. You know about his off-court issues. You didn't use a high pick on him. He can score. If he can bulk up, maybe he gets some minutes by the end of the season.
I think that's absolutely a possibility. I'll be totally transparent. I didn't watch a ton of Emoni Bates this year. I did watch him a bit more last year when he was in Memphis because I was just he came in as the number 2 recruit into that last class, played for a really good Memphis team. But his situation was always a little bit weird. However, whenever he got run, he was played really good. And the number one thing that jumps out is his scoring. And this is kind of the player comparison I would throw out there is Jordan Clarkson. And maybe that's a lazy comparison because they're both kind of skinny. They're kind of score first more than anything. Yeah. Emoni Bates is a little bit taller, and I think that could separate him from a guy like Jordan Clarkson. But overall, I think it's a solid pick for the Cavs. Like you said, low risk, high upside. If he does hit, I kind of see his ceiling as being like a sixth man type of player, somebody that can come in and provide some very valuable scoring. And frankly, I think the Cavs have some sort of need for that. Their half-court scoring, their half-court offense was pretty bad against that Knicks team. And maybe that's just first-year playoff struggles. But also having a guy that can come in, that can light it up from anywhere, and just be another option for that Cavs team. Maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year. I think that would be super valuable for where the Cavs are and where they're heading. Overall, I think it's a pretty good pick where they picked him.
Josh, what are your thoughts on Emoni James Wayne Bates?
I don't know a lot about him. I actually don't watch a lot of college basketball until March rolls around. But I did hear of a little bit of the off-court issues and stuff. So I think him going to a team with maybe some strong personality-like leaders is a good thing for him. If he does have some of those issues off the court, and Donovan Mitchell is as good as it gets when it comes to that, I feel like. Yeah. So I don't see him doing as well at maybe a Houston-like team or a team with more youth and more, you know what I mean. But
no, the Cavs have their youth, but no, I agree. They got young leaders, I think, where some teams don't. I think they learned a lot from the way this season went. We'll see. He was much better this season. Interesting, Richie. I believe that Clarkson came in as a point guard, right? And then eventually, he right, Jackson, he was a point guard in LA for his first, right? Yeah. Then Debo came in. I think he moved off ball, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and it was cool. I think on the Clarkson front, this was his first year as a starter since that, I think, second season in LA. It's been a six-man since then. I was very happy the day the Cavs traded for him. Obviously, it went how it went in for the whole thing, but I'm okay with that comparison. Yeah, he's 6'9", 190. He's not quite KD thin.
190 is generous, Zach.
Yeah, that's what college basketball is telling me, man. I don't know.
I saw 175 yesterday on Emoni Bates, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, maybe he wore the James Harden suit. Maybe he lent it to him after the draft so he could impress scouts with a little more weight. He could have. Nonetheless, we'll see how he does. And he's someone that is definitely going to be considered an underdog. And folks, remember, you could sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Promo code 216, and that's your first deposit up to $100. Again, sign up for Underdog Fantasy is step 1. Type in promo code 216 is step 2, and step 3, you get a deposit match up to $100. But of course, the Utah Jazz got not 1, not 2, but 3 first-round picks. And to the surprise of some, myself included, Richie, they kept all the picks. They got Keontae George Out of Baylor, they got Taylor Hendricks, UCF, and they got Bryce Sensabaugh, Ohio State. Early grades of these three, and I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, some folks, is Georgia point guard? Because he didn't have the assist numbers last year. Is he a point guard?
His situation was interesting because he played in a Baylor system where there were pretty much two other point guards. There were two guards, and he was playing a little bit of small forward. However, if you look back to high school and some of his international play, he's been a point guard. I think from what I've heard, the Jazz believe he can develop into a lead guard, and they believe he has the playmaking upside. When I think of his playmaking, though, I kind of equate it to Donovan Mitchell or Jamal Murray's playmaking, where those two guys, you think about them, they're definitely score first kind of guys, right? But there are situations where they can be super effective as passers, as playmakers. I think we saw a little bit of that with Donovan while he was in Utah. I was watching some of his watching some clips against Memphis in that playoff series 2 years ago, and he did a really good job at being able to create for his teammates in that series. And I think that's where you're buying in with Keontae George, is his playmaking upside. There's upside there. He's a quick decision maker. He does okay in the half court setting. He thrives in the pick and roll. That's where I've seen his playmaking stand out more than anywhere else on the court. But he's probably going to be a score first guy more than anything. And so, like, I'll throw those comparisons out again. I kind of think of him as Jamal Murray or Donovan Mitchell.
And what are some thoughts, either of you, feel free to jump in, on Hendricks and then the late first-round pick from OSU, Bryce Sensabaugh?
I really like the Hendricks pick. I know that the organization is real high on him, but I remember a few years ago, it was one of the series we got beat in the playoffs, and I remember thinking, I can't remember which series, but I remember thinking, man, in this league, you just need long, athletic wings that can stretch the floor. They can defend multiple positions, can stretch the floor, and are freak athletes. And I think Hendricks is that perfect 3-and-D type guy like that. Excellent shot blocker from the weak side. He's super athletic and long, but also shot 40% from three. I mean, stretch the floor with Lauri Markkanen driving in the hole. I like our chances if that comes to it. And imagining Hendricks, Markkanen, and Kessler, if they're all starting or on the floor at the same time, that's a ton of length and a ton of rim protection that teams, I think, will struggle with in the paint as long as they can find their rotations and gel. But I really like Hendricks. I watched him a little bit in the this year a little bit. I didn't watch the Sensabaugh kid as much, but I've seen some breakdowns and some highlights of him. But I think the Hendricks pick will be great. It may be a year or two kind of thing, but his athleticism and shooting 40% from three, that 3-and-D guy that everyone has been talking about for years.
Anything else to add, Richie, on those guys?
Yeah, I think on Hendricks, I mean, Jackson broke it down beautifully. He's got a lot of upside, and he's going to come in with a high floor. I think that's an important note on Hendricks. He already is a really good off-the-ball player. And one thing that sticks out is he knows his role. How hard is it for a lot of young kids to come into the NBA and they just have no idea what their role is? They come in and they think that there's something that they're not, and it takes them a couple of years. When I watch Hendricks, he's somebody that already knows what his role is and how he's going to project to the next level. And if that's your base, then it just makes it so much easier to add stuff to your game. So I really like the Hendricks pick. I think it was a great pick. He'll fit along greatly. I'm curious to see whether he is a starter to start the season or not. I think that's going to be a conversation going on Jazz Twitter all offseason. Going on Sensabaugh, I watched a little bit of Sensabaugh this year. I've watched more of him since we drafted him. So I actually had him number 14 on my board as I was going through the draft process. The thing that jumps out is just his scoring and where he's able to score from, which is everywhere. He's really good around the rim. He has like some surprisingly athletic finishes because when you see him, he looks kind of bigger, but he's pretty athletic. And then in the mid-range, he kind of has like a DeMar DeRozan-esque thing going for him. Really good at just using his body to create space. And then he can score from any way on the three, whether it's catch and shoot, whether it's coming around a screen in movement. I've been really impressed with watching Bryce Sensabaugh. I do think there are some injury issues, which could be one of the reasons why he dropped to number 28. And he also has a lot of issues on defense. What's encouraging, though, is he was the first person to acknowledge that. He was saying, like, in the pre-draft process, he was saying that he needs to work on his defense. And so having that kind of self-awareness as a 19-year-old kid is super promising. And I think it was a great pick considering where they picked him.
Yeah, shot 53% inside the arc, 40 from deep, and 83 from the line. So, yeah, if he acknowledges that, he can figure it out. A lot of people come in, they think they're that guy. They can't be told nothing. So that's a big step. And we'll see with Utah. Do expect Hendricks and George to take on pretty big roles right away. And since the Balls have to wait a bit, the Spurs last year, 3 first-round picks. The most well-known, obviously, Jeremy Sohan, other than taunting LeBron this offseason. Probably put in some work. He had a great first season as a playmaker, as a rebounder, and in the post. A lot of people comparing him way too early to Dennis Rodman, changing his hair, trying to be something. The one-handed free throw was an interesting touch. Malachi Branham, OSU guy, right before Bryce Sensabaugh. He had a nice 1 season. It might have been 2 seasons, actually, over there. And Blake Wesley, Notre Dame's highest selection in a long time. The only other Notre Dame players I can remember, top of my head, obviously, I'm missing some, would be Chris Quinn and Luke Harangody, both of who were very brief Cleveland Cavaliers, only the real ones remember. But let's go to the offseason, because what happens with these 3 guys may be very contingent on what Danny Ainge and company decide to do. So with that in mind, Jackson, I'll start with you. There really aren't too many free agents here. They do have roster spots. Think about the Horton Tuckers and the Olynyks, and maybe even like Chris Dunn, for example. Who are some of the tradable pieces in Utah that might be moved to open up more minutes for the Abajis and these young guys as well?
I think that point guard position is going to be really interesting going forward. We do have Collin Sexton, who's been very actively, looks like he's really trying to be our leader off the floor and vocally. He's reached out to the 3 draft picks already. He's welcomed them. So I think he's trying to take on that role of being the guy and the vocal leader on and off the floor. But then you have Taylor Horton Tucker, who replaced him when Sexton got hurt and gave us great minutes towards the end of the year. He started out as one of those guys to me where he has the ball and you kind of cringe waiting for him to do something, and then he'll either be the best player and make the best play on the floor, or you roll your eyes and throw your hands up thinking, what are you thinking? So, but he came in and gave great point guard minutes, and now with Keontae George looking to reprise or change his role to maybe a more playmaker point guard type role, that point guard spot will be interesting. I think Sexton is on the trading block, and we could see him stay or go. Obviously, the Clarkson free agency signing is yet to be done or seen. We don't know what he's planning on doing yet. But we do have a ton of youth now. We do have some legit star caliber with Markkanen. It'd be nice to get another, maybe if Markkanen's your number 2 go-to guy on a team, you're in pretty good shape right now with the way he played last year. So I would love to be able to get some pieces for that number 1 option and move Markkanen to our secondary attack. But I don't know. I think Sexton you could see moving, and I hate to say it, especially with the way he's handled things this offseason. But he's probably the guy after Clarkson I see not sticking around most likely.
Do you think they're both gone?
I see a team paying Clarkson too much, or more than the Jazz can offer. So I do see Clarkson being gone. Sexton, I think, comes down to that point guard role. If front office sees him as the future point guard, we retain him. If not, we look to move him and keep George there, or THT even has surprised a lot of people and could play some decent minutes.
Richie, what are your thoughts? Same subject, tradable pieces and whatnot.
I'm gonna flip the question on you, Zach,
Sure.
because I'm curious to see. Do you think Collin Sexton is a point guard? Because I wasn't able to watch him while he was with the Cavs.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Garland came in towards his like 2nd or 3rd year, and then he's played alongside Mike Conley this year. He's never he didn't like have the point guard role. So I'm just curious to see like what you think of Sexton as a point guard.
So I don't think assists aren't always the central measurement of a point guard. Obviously, we all love the Rondo stats, and you love the John Stockton stats from his career. Think about Magic Johnson and Jay Kidd and Russ and these point guards that just rack up assists like it's nobody's business. right? 8 a game, 9 a game, 10 a game. But there could be great point guards. It's not that common. They're averaging 4 assists a game. Because for part of his career, Allen Iverson was a point guard when he wasn't a small 2. He was great. And I'm not about to say anything about Collin Sexton and Allen Iverson in the same sentence. But I will say that both of these guys are quick. They've got great handles. And it's very hard to stop them in open space. And again, a reminder that Collin Sexton, his last fully healthy season, averaged almost 25 a game. Single-handedly, for a 3-day span, took apart KD, Harden, and Kyrie. Obviously, he had a little help. But he took them apart. He is one of the biggest reasons the Nets didn't do anything. Obviously, it was only 2 games. He gave them a little knock to the chin immediately. Let's not act like Sexton being hurt the last 2 seasons means that he can't be the guy. I think he can play point guard. Again, he's not going to average 6, 7, 8 assists a game, but he can. I remember his rookie season. He had some very impressive games. One of the more ones to me, I didn't know about the injury. This is right before John Wall got hurt during his Wizards days. He was still playing every day. And he had like an 0 for 7 game against the Cavs, while Collin Sexton on the other side put up 20+. I think he had 5 or 6 assists. Cavs got the win. It was a small thing, but it showed he's outplaying the John Walls of the league. And let's remember, he was a top 5 point guard for a good 3 or 4 years. It's a 4 or 5-time All-NBA, All-Defense. He was cooking him. Sexton's been clutch before. Sexton can facilitate. And he played on a team, Richie, before we had Allen and Mobley now. They still had lob threats. Drummond was a lob threat. Larry Nance was a lob threat. He can throw, and I'm sure you saw some last year. He can throw a nice lob. He came from a team that had, I think, the best lob system in the league. He'll find his guy. I think he can. Maybe they decide Keontae just comes in immediately. Maybe, and what they really should do, I think, is give Chris Dunn some chance. And I think you might want to sell high on Horton Tucker for that regard. I would trust Collin a lot more because Jackson, when we talked last year, Richie, my last pod with Jackson was about a month and a half into the season. The Jazz had some issues with deciding who to play and who to sit. And he said pretty much without a hesitation after all that, Jalen Horton Tucker was the guy that should go. And yes, things can change. Things can change. I didn't forget that. So,
of course you didn't. No, I'm talking about mostly the second half of the year. The last month or two was when THT came alive.
Sure.
But
I'd rather have Collin. If it comes down to one of them, I trade. Look, Collin has 3 more years on his deal. Don't give up after 1. And even just you looked at the Collin stats when the trade happened. You probably saw 11 games year before, 17 PPG. But that's when Mobley just came in. He was pretty much the 3rd or 4th option down from the 1st or 2nd. He was in Cleveland for a while. I was hoping he'd stick. The Don trade was the only situation I saw him ever getting moved in, personally. So I think he should be the guy. Give him a chance. Maybe he ends up having to play the Clarkson role and come off the bench. But whatever. I think he can be the point guard. I think he should be the opening day point guard. He's going to be healthy, right? He's definitely put on even more muscle. He's already jacked like crazy. I think he can be the guy. And all that to say, yes, I believe in him. He can be.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I kind of buy into it. I won't say that I'm completely there, but what makes me buy into it is I heard this. I read this in an article, and it was a little bit about Collin Sexton operating under Mike Conley's tutelage, and Mike Conley being a really good mentor to him. Them watching film together. Mike Conley is one of my favorite point guards. I grew to admire the way he played with so much patience and was able to set up his teammates. He's kind of like the epitome of a point guard when you think of a point guard, right? Always making the right play. And I think Collin Sexton had a little bit of that. What stood out was after the trade deadline, Mike Conley's in Minnesota, and Collin Sexton has a couple games where he's the lead playmaker. And the Jazz, even though their team was completely deflated, they had lost a couple of their guys. I think morales were low, man. I went to the game against the Timberwolves the day they traded Mike Conley. That was one of the worst performances I've ever seen the Jazz play. You could just tell something was up. And then they went on a road trip right after that, and Collin Sexton had a really impressive stretch before getting re-injured, where I was like, okay, he has a lot of on-ball playmaking skills that he wasn't able to showcase when he was playing with Mike Conley, when he was playing kind of more of a scorer role. And so I think for that reason, there's a lot to buy into as far as Collin Sexton being a lead playmaker. And the nice thing about where the Jazz are is they have time to make these decisions. They don't have to rush Collin Sexton. They don't have to say, hey, he's not going to be the point guard. They can still take another season or another half a season to figure out if he can be that kind of point guard player. So, yeah, I mean, I totally see both sides of the argument.
I mean, you do have a couple other former Cavs here that, and one of them's already been mentioned a couple times as deserved, one of the best seasons we've ever seen, almost out of nowhere, but not exactly. Lauri Markkanen, coming off an all-star season, all-NBA season, elite, number of fantastic performances. He's there with Ochai Agbaji, who had some flashes, had some bad games, but he was a 4-year college guy, still going to be some learning curve. So what are your thoughts, Jackson, start with you on those two? And should they both, so I guess it's more of an Ochai part, should they both be starting on opening day this season?
I would like to see Ochai starting. I think that front office is high on him. He developed a ton in just the 1 year we had him from start to finish of the season. He's, like you said, it's really beneficial for those guys to come in and know their role already. And I think it took him some time to learn it. And I think by the end of the year, he kind of got that. Turned into a decent corner three kind of guy, a good slasher also on the offensive end, and works hard on defense. I would like to, so I think the front office is high on him being the future combo guard, maybe shooting guard, if we want to put a term to it. So I would like to see him get that time, more of that time and stuff. The Clarkson thing, again, throws a wrinkle into that because you never know what he's going to do. But I don't know if I see them putting Clarkson back on the bench if he decides to re-sign. So I think it all depends on that, but I would love to see Agbaji there getting starter minutes at least, because the amount he developed last year, I think his potential is still high, and front office sees it as well. So I would love to see him get the time that he needs to develop a little more. But yeah, Markkanen's a no-brainer. I think you said that. I mean, he's the future going forward as far as I can tell, and it would be fun to find another, like a 1-2 punch for him to get another all-star caliber player there. So yet to be seen. You never know.
The one thing with Jordan Clarkson, and then Richie will come to you, is they don't know who he is. You saw that video. They're interviewing him on the street. No one looks like Jordan Clarkson. Not that many people in Utah got that hair going. They got 4 or 5 neck tats. They got everything like, oh, so what do you do for fun? Oh, do you go to Jazz games? Yeah, sometimes. He's Jordan Clarkson.
Okay, to add to that, so the Jazz just announced they're putting the games on local over-the-air television.
I did hear.
And with that, before that they said the amount of Utahns that had access to the games last year was like 30-something%. So that could be why people don't know Clarkson as much, and with the new hair and stuff, you never know. So I'm just gonna throw that in there, that hopefully that we get to know our guys a little bit more now that everybody can watch Jazz games in Utah.
That's amazing. Honestly, why can't more teams do that? I don't have the issues. I can watch the Cavs on League Pass, not being in Ohio. But if I was, I'd be just another complainer about why can't I watch my team? Young man yells at cloud. You know how that is. But Richie, what are your thoughts on those guys, or on Agbaji and on Markkanen, and if they should both be definitive opening day starters? Obviously, the Clarkson situation, but
yeah, I think that's a great question. Close to the trade deadline, the Jazz made it clear that they had 3 cornerstones, and that was Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, and Ochai Agbaji. That those were 3 guys that they probably wouldn't trade in any deal unless the deal was mind blowing. So I think Ochai Agbaji should be a starter on day one. When I'm looking at Ochai Agbaji's career trajectory and how he could possibly project, and this is like a ceiling projection, I kind of think of Desmond Bane. So Desmond Bane came into the NBA as an older player, kind of like Ochai Agbaji. Ochai is 23 years old right now. Desmond came in at 23. And he played his first couple of seasons. His first season, he only averaged 9.2 points per game. Ochai Agbaji is right around that same mark. And then that summer league before his second season, when Desmond Bane broke out, they gave him a lot of on-ball responsibilities that I think were a big, crucial part of his breakout season in his second season with Memphis. I'm curious to see if Ochai has a similar situation or what he does in summer league. Towards the end of the season, they gave Ochai more on-ball opportunities, and I think that's where you start to explore some of that untapped potential. is with his on-ball opportunities and see what he can do on the ball, how he can create for others. And that's what Memphis was able to do with Desmond Bane. And obviously Desmond Bane has popped and looks like a really good player now. So I'm curious to see if Ochai Agbaji can have a similar, probably not the same, but a similar kind of trajectory where he develops a little bit in Summer League, gets more opportunities for on-ball reps. And then I think if he shows out in Summer League, we'll even see if he plays or how much he plays. But if he's able to show out and put on a really good performance, I think he's a starter from day one. If not, then you kind of look at the lineup, and if like Clarkson's returning, if Sexton's returning, I don't know how he would fit in or where he would be, because you have Kessler at the 5, probably Olynyk at the 4, Markkanen at the 3, and then if Clarkson comes back, I'm guessing Clarkson is the 2.
Yeah.
But then do you have Agbaji playing the 1? I don't know.
Short stretch, man. You could have a short stretch, kind of one of those things where you play a guy for the first 5 minutes in a spot, almost like those when guys are young coming up, like for example, back when Markel Brown used to start for the Nets 7 or 8 years ago. He's a rookie. He'd play like 7 or 8 minutes, first and third. That's it. Like when DeMar was a rookie with the Raptors, he'd play first and third minutes and then wouldn't play. Kind of like the Boozer Taj thing. He's going to play more than that. Maybe you start him there, and then as you shrink the rotation later in the season, you start him at point, you sit him the rest of the court, and then he starts the 2, and he can play as much as he deserves as far as his play that day, right? Something like that.
And I think, too, the league is kind of funneling to positionless at times, where you just put your 5 best players on the floor, and you could see Agbaji being the quote-unquote 1 and having Clarkson bring the ball up half the time, Lauri Markkanen bringing the ball up most of the – like, you can run your offense through your 2 through 5 now watching Jokic, you know? So I think we're getting to a point where we are positionless. The league is going that direction, and you just throw your 5 best guys out there, and Agbaji could be one of those 5, not necessarily being the point guard of the Jazz, you know?
The only issue with that then would be is when the press starts to come, whatever part of the game, will he be good enough to dribble out of it or make the right pass? And teams won't always go with that. It really depends on the situation. Very few teams press for 48 minutes. You got to rest. You got to take a few off and just defend in the half. But there's going to be times late in game if they want to try it, and maybe when they have one of those free throw lineups in, the team gets with a little contact. Can he throw the ball down? Because there are plenty of those NBA games this year. Guys on every team were put in that situation. Can you make the long pass? And they completely blundered it. So if that's something they can work on, I'd love to see it, just to see him play more. I'm a big fan of his and think he's going to do some colossal things. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-world guy. I could see him being a 20-point scorer, guy that gets one of those 1 or 2 all-star fringe selections and can make a massive impact, whether it's in Utah or somewhere else for 9 or 10 years.
Zach, you're
saying the right thing, Zach. You're speaking our language here.
Zach, were you disappointed when Agbaji was included in the trade?
Yes. I knew he could shoot, he could defend. Our need at the time was another guy that can come in and make plays. We didn't know what was going to happen with Collin. The way the lineup ended up shaking out with the Coro, Levert, yada, 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 could have been perfect. He's the guy that – and look, Donovan Mitchell's still worth it. But I think about what they were missing between Markkanen and Sexton and what Agbaji could have been right there. When we draft guys from Kansas in the first round, they don't stay. They get traded. Wiggins, Agbaji – of course, Sasha Cowan, who I do believe played at Kansas, might have been in a title game. Played 1 year with the Cavs. Played 1 year, won a title, and then. But anyway. Okay, yeah, we transitioned. So we got 1 segment left here, and then we will wrap up. Richie, we'll start with you. Then Jackson, you take us home. Obviously, I can't answer this. I haven't really thought about a wish list for any team besides the Cavs. But Richie. 3 dream off-season moves for the Utah Jazz. What do they look like?
First and foremost, re-sign Jordan Clarkson. I love Jordan Clarkson. Like I said, the Jazz can be patient where they are right now. And if Clarkson's wanting something in like the $25 million range, then you're probably saying no. But if he's wanting something like in the 18 to 20 for the next 4 years, I think I'm okay with that. I don't know. That's wish list number 1. I want Jordan Clarkson back on the team. I think he's great. Number 2, I would like to see the Jazz use their cap space to absorb salary and retain cap flexibility for the next couple of years. I think they're just where they're positioned right now. They have so much flexibility. They can absorb a contract. Like, one name that has been floating around lately has been Tobias Harris, and I think he would be a great on-court addition as well.
That would be nice. Him and
And
Lauri each other.
let's say the Jazz have like $20 million in cap space or however much they need to absorb Tobias Harris's contract, and they absorb that contract, then I don't know. I think that's a solid move because he is a free agent next year. And so that contract won't be on your books. You still have cap flexibility for the future while having a player for the intermediate season for this season that can help you. Wish list number 3, I want there to be a clear point guard on opening night. And I don't care if it's Keontae George, Chris Dunn, Collin Sexton, Taylor Horton-Tucker. I want there to be a clear point guard. And I hope we have a really good idea after Summer League, after free agency, and after the trades.
All right. Hopefully those things come to fruition. And Richie Ostler is smiling as he gets ready to watch opening night, whether it's in person or on TV. Jackson, what about yourself? 3 dream offseason moves for the Jazz.
I do like the Clarkson thing. I think retaining him just as another vet, another locker room guy. As goofy as a personality he seems like he has, I think he's huge in the locker room. So I would love to retain him. I think, like you said, if we can keep it under 20, we go for it. That's probably Jazz's limit and budget. And I mean, if we're dreaming, we sign him to a 2-year, but I know that's probably not what he's going for. So number 2, if we're going completely out of the realm of realism here, which is what dreams are for, right? We look for that number 1 option, superstar caliber guy to go get with Markkanen. I remember when Luka Doncic, there was all those things about him not wanting to be in Dallas. The butterflies kind of crept up in my chest because obviously every team in the nation is thinking about what if Luka came here? You know what I mean? So a guy like that, if we're dreaming, we
are dreaming. No one's
in a deep sleep, a guy like Luka being on the team would be awesome. The third thing I hope that we kind of do is, and I think we're all committed to being off the tank with the number of draft picks we have. I hope we can maybe consolidate them for some good veteran guys to bring in, or some good instant impact guys on the team, because I think we're too good as it stands now to lose games. I know we're not contenders or anything like that, but we are a playoff team. In my mind, we're pushing that playoff position, and so we're too good to be losing games now. Last year, I had a different opinion on that. So I hope we take some of these future picks and bring in some immediate impact so we can creep up into that playoff bracket. So I hope that's what we do. I don't know what that means or who we bring in for that matter. I know Tobias Harris was a name, but I also saw Daryl Morley's wishes as far as with the Cavs on who he wanted to bring in for them, which is asinine and makes zero sense to anybody. But
not even the Sixers. You can't play number 31 next to number 21. That doesn't work. They tried to get Horford. It didn't work. No.
So I don't know if he's in realistic just because of after I saw that. Yeah. But he would be a great plan. And I know the Jazz looked at him and liked him a lot the last couple of years as well. So
yeah, it's going to be a fun offseason for sure. All I want to see for the Cavs, upgrade the backup center because you didn't have a playable backup big and it lost you a playoff series. As soon as Allen started getting bodied, you had no other option. We'll have to see. The name that had been floated around would be a Bismack Biyombo type just for toughness. Backup doesn't have to play a ton, but you go against Mitch. You're not boxing Bismack out. He had a 27-rebound playoff game, and that one performance essentially got him way too much money as a backup. Orlando paid him over $70 million to be a backup to an all-star caliber starting center for 4 seasons. All the bigs. Jan Mahinmi got $72 million to be a backup, so then again, who knows what the heck was going on. Somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who had some dirt on somebody. So we're not going to revisit 2016. And obviously, Luol Deng is the real winner of 2016. He played 1 season with the Lakers, 2 games with the Lakers, and he finished out on Minnesota with Tibbs. He rode off into his own sunset. Now he's helping people around the world. So shout out to him. I'm sure he's somewhere. Maybe he'll pop up in a Bulls game with Joakim at some point this season. But I just want new names with the Cavs. Upgrade over Robin. Figure out who's going to be that new guard. Do you give some of last year's G Leaguers a chance? And just get it right. Have a competitive roster. Don't have anyone on the team that's not ready to contribute on the court at some point. A lot of those guys were not ready. Robin Lopez had 1 or 2 good games. Sam Merrill was not worth it. Danny Green, unfortunately, as much as we wanted him to shine in the playoffs, was only good in the games. We only got playing time when everyone else was resting. So there were never any real rotation situations. Figure it out. That's it. Would love to see both of our squads top 6. I mean, the Cavs should be. If not, a lot of people are getting fired. Top 6. The Jazz can be. Anything's possible with this West. The Warriors didn't they sneak into 6, barely over 500. So as good as the West is insanely average at the same time. Anything can happen, right? These next 3 weeks are going to tell us everything that we need to know about projections for next season. A lot can change. Right, guys? Anything's possible.
I mean, anything's possible. Yeah, I'd love to be in that top 6 conversation. But like Richie said, we have time. We have years under these guys' contracts, and we'll see what happens. Danny Ainge is a wizard, so you never know.
If you say that, he's going to go to Washington. Remember when the Sun said, Chris Paul, you're a wizard? And he was there. Careful what you say. But nonetheless, any closing thoughts, either of you, before we wrap up?
Thanks for Lauri Markkanen. Just big thank you to the Cavs for giving him to us. Really appreciate it. He's great.
Just thanks for having me back, Zach. This has been fun. Don't be a stranger. Keep us in mind next time you're thinking about Jazz basketball. So appreciate you.
This right here is Jazz basketball. He is Richie Ostler. You can catch him on the Swish Lake City podcast or the great content he is doing for at Jazzaliers. Jackson Stevenett, co-host. Shout out to his guy Tyson. Do we have a last name for Tyson?
Tyson Curtis.
Tyson Curtis and Jackson Stevenett are the Jazz Beats. You might not hear a ton of trumpets, but you'll hear NBA talk. The best kind of Jazz Beats. Don't tell the people at the club I said that. He's Jackson. He's Richie. We'll see you next time on Network 216 across the campus.